Here we are with Derek Price at ETS After Party. We're chit-chatting with everyone during the show. IPW, Las Vegas 2021, and Thrive. The whole symphony is here. Derek, welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah. What has your last year and a half been like, given what you do? I mean, really.
It's been interesting. I think it's, to use the dreaded word pivot, I think we have to pivot, and pivot continues to happen. I lead a team of incredible media salespeople who, as of April of 2020, didn't have any media to sell and didn't have people wanting to buy media in the travel space.
It's a tough spot to be in.
Yeah. But
you don't have any product, you don't have any clients.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's not that we didn't have product, but we didn't have people coming to our site.
Sure.
I think the interesting thing, though, is Expedia continued to have incredible insight into our customers' behavior. There may be less of them because of what we were going through back then, but we still had insight into what they were doing, and we actually quickly shift to being data sharing partners. And we've always been pretty free with our data directly with our partners. We don't sell it. It is, to coin a term, we are a fenced garden, so we don't allow other people access to our data, but we do share it with our partners, which allowed us to continue engaging with our partners, even if they weren't buying media.
Totally important, even if you're not doing business.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think we all of a sudden realized this gave people things to think about. So we could watch what our consumers were doing. We started doing intercept surveys. So we asked them, why were you on our site? There's a pandemic. What are you doing?
What was the answer to that, by the way?
There was a range from it. There were people that actually said, I'm dreaming. Like, when I can travel, I want to see what there is out there. There was a small number of people that actually were still booking.
Did it affect what information you presented, knowing that people were dreaming?
Yeah. Well, I don't... The dreaming part didn't affect what we were putting in front of them. I think it became very apparent that people, if marketers had the ability to continue to market, they had to be there. Because if you stopped your marketing and you're a destination, people didn't pay attention to you. Out of sight, out of mind.
That is the most important takeaway for any marketer during this time. But so many didn't, right?
No.
So many just turned off the spigot.
Absolutely turned it off. And I think, I think some people had to.
Yeah.
If you're a governmental DMO, you had people who may not understand it making decisions for you. I can't fault them for it.
Right.
But we definitely saw those destinations that didn't pull the plug. They may have turned it down to a trickle. Were the ones that actually continued to be successful.
And it seems so obvious from one side, right? Top of mind, regardless of whether there's a transaction. When there will be a transaction, you will be top of mind.
Right.
Simple as that.
And what we saw, consumers were coming back in that dreaming phase, and they were looking at multiple destinations, and they were looking with no rhyme or reason.
Yeah.
And again, I think people are now, and one of the things that we did most recently is through surveys, we found they're incredibly engaged with media because they don't have an idea in place, and so they're using different things to inspire them, and media is part of that. And I think one of the things for those advertisers that were continually in market, they had to pivot and they had to make changes to their messaging, and it was about wide open spaces or cleaning protocols, or we had a destination that said, please stay home and thank you, but when you're ready, come back and see us because we've done all this work.
Great smart messaging.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, what messaging do you have? You can flip over to being an arbiter of information about a pandemic, which me personally, I wouldn't want to make my brand associated with. If I wasn't a pandemic specialist before the pandemic, I'm not going to put that hat on. But hey, people did what they had to do, destinations did what they had to do, and I don't fault them for it. It's not like we've had one of these before, at least in our lifetime.
Right.
Give me some top of line metrics about booking in the last in this very uncomfortable intermediate stop and start area. Are we seeing shorter booking windows? Are we seeing any insights?
Well, and I think we saw that, something we saw very, very quickly. I happen to be based in Florida, and so good or bad, Florida basically never shut down.
Yeah.
But what we did see from a booking perspective, specifically for Florida, is an incredibly short window. So Florida's always had a pretty short window. So if you think about that, 0 to 21 days is the primary piece of business. However, we were seeing 50% of the searches and bookings coming in 0 to 6 days. So, and that really shows consumer confidence and or not confidence in booking out farther because they didn't know what was going to happen. Now we saw up until mid to late July of this year, we started to see some of those booking windows grow, which says consumer confidence was growing. They were willing to book farther out.
Sure.
I think if I take a step back, a lot of the policies that ended up changing because of the pandemic, so think flexible cancellation policies, refundable stuff, that helped that consumer feel a bit more comfortable. And some of those policies are still in place. So if you think about booking a hotel that traditionally is not refundable, non-changeable, you have some of that flexibility still in there.
I have to tell you, as just a traveler, I just love that. I love this suspension of all these things that I find very penalizing, particularly on the airline side. To change it is $200, to do this is $300.
Yes.
It's just, and I get it. It's fee based. They've been able to, and they've rocked that. But to have those things suspended was just so freeing in a certain way.
And it's interesting. So if you really think about it, and I'm geeky this way, but my favorite airline, they have a basic economy, which in normal days is completely non-refundable, non-changeable. And then you have the next step up, which in the olden days had a $200 change fee. Now, there's no longer a change fee, and the step-up price from basic to that is like $50 or $70.
Sure.
So why would you still pay for the cheapest flight when you can't make a change, when you only for $70 more, you have all the flexibility in the world?
Yeah.
But again, people don't think that way.
So let's talk about prices and pricing for a minute, because I know that you're on the solution side, but those two things are very tightly related.
Yep.
It's no secret. Group is still bruised, and it's going to be a while before it's back, right?
Yeah.
And I think the most sensitive to that are airlines, right? Because that's their bread and butter in a huge way, and the hotel side when they expect to have their entire organization or their entire bottom line rather affected in ways that they've never foreseen.
Right.
Is this going to be on the shoulders of leisure?
So initially, I think it is just going to have to be.
Right.
If you think about, again, it depends on where you are, what market you are, what the size of the box is. Sorry, not box, hotel. If you've got a hotel that is 80% group, leisure is never going to be big enough to support and compensate for that.
It's not going to stop them from trying.
And so, I feel so sad for the leisure sales managers that are still employed because that is an enormous amount of stress to pick that up. I think there is going to be a rebalance. I think what's going to be interesting, though, is it ever going to go back to what was pre-pandemic? And this gives, and I've said this from the very beginning, this gives smart hoteliers an opportunity to reestablish their entire operating. So you think distribution, you think mix of business. I think it gives them an opportunity to go, what do I want to be? What does this hotel want to be? Like, yes, group's great, but is that the best business? And in many cases, they're going to say, yes, it's the best business. But is it? And it gives them an opportunity to shift their focus and create a different strategy if they want to.
And that's where it comes down. Either they're going to have to blow up their metrics as well.
Right.
Right. There's just no way around that, because one of them is, how much we're making per room.
Right.
And that's
it's interesting. So I had a conversation with a DMO that has traditionally done a lot of wholesale business with international marketplaces, and there are specific origin markets that demand very, very, very low rates, but produce an enormous amount of room nights. Well, many markets within the U.S. are actually doing better now than they did in 2019 with domestic business at a higher rate. So are they going to go back to that old distribution of having wholesale agreements? And I don't know, but if they're making RevPAR now with domestic leisure. Now, we also know that domestic leisure is the minute people can travel internationally,
it's fickle, right?
It's going to be fickle.
Yeah.
And when more markets open up, people won't be going to these places. But is it ever going to go back to what it was? And my guess is no. I think there are going to be some hoteliers, there are going to be some companies that are going to go, we want to go back because that was really profitable.
Sure.
But staffing has changed,
Yep.
and expectations of customers have changed. And I think because of the nature of the pandemic, our industry has fundamentally changed.
How has Expedia changed?
Well, I think, we have become incredible. I mean, and I see it from the inside. I've
Sure.
always thought we were very customer focused and very partner focused. Some people may not always feel that way, but we've become much more consultative. I think we are. So if we go back to April of 2020, our call center volume for cancellation and changes rose 1,600% in 90 minutes when the big announcement happened. No company is prepared to manage that.
That's just, yeah.
And so one of the things that happened very immediately, we had new leadership come in from a CEO perspective, who said, "Wow, you're incredibly complicated. Why are you this complicated? Change it, and change it quick." And so we've made it easier for people to cancel and change. We've made it easier for them to communicate virtually versus having to get on the phone. And if you remember back then, getting anybody on the phone was next to impossible.
True.
So I think streamlining processes, removing duplication of effort, it was sort of an overarching theme within the organization.
And on your side, on the solutions side, is it fair to say that you maybe have thought a little more on the scale between client and partner and arrived at a greater partnership level than client level?
Oh, I absolutely. And I go back to, what we did when we started doing sort of regular data sharing. And we became much more involved with our partners, talking about their business and talking about what are the signals that we should be looking for when it's safe if you had to be pulled out of market.
It's a smart move on your guys' part.
Well, and I think, one of the things that from a media standpoint, because our media platform sits on an e-commerce, we're a very unique situation. We have that direct connection to our consumers. But we all of a sudden became solutions-based versus a seller of media. And I think having that deep relationship, and I think what's interesting, we had the opportunity, some DMOs worked with an agency, and we really historically worked very closely with the agency, and all of a sudden we became much closer to the DMO client directly.
Right.
In some cases.
Right.
And not to say that the agent wasn't involved, but it wasn't the conversation the agency needed to have. It was the conversation that the DMO had. And I think what also was happening, because our counterparts in the lodging team started having similar conversations with the hoteliers, and all of a sudden we were having conversations with the lodging team and talking to the DMO and the stakeholders at the same time. It
Because
just makes sense.
they are closer to the ground.
Oh my God, yeah.
The information they
Yeah.
have from the hotels directly, and as seen through the agency, and I get both of those, but it's kind of an interesting. I like that you focus on the word solutions. I always wondered what that word was doing there, but it's a nice use of it. Who knew it would take a pandemic, at least in my estimation, to bring it to the forefront? Right?
There's so many things that happen. We as an organization have always been very conscious of inclusion and diversity within the organization. But with everything that happened, that was incredibly sad and horrific, and that we witnessed, it has become even more important in the industry. And it is a topic of conversation. We went so far as we actually created an entire team with a chief diversity officer, instead of having somebody who had a job and then that was their part-time gig. We have somebody who's dedicated. I think it's so amazing that we are making conscious decisions to become a better organization and create better employees, regardless of where they end up.
And look, if that's one of the outcomes of the pandemic, because so many people, it was fight, flight, or freeze, right?
Right.
People thought they could push their way through this.
Yep.
People just cut loose, or they ran from it, or they just stopped doing everything.
Right.
And it was interesting to see how people responded. I think the smartest minds use this as a time to self-reflect. Use this as a time to look at all of our operations, since the engine's not running right now pretty much.
Right.
Let's take it apart and see if it's still the most efficient engine we have. Let's look at our chart. Are we still going in the right direction we should be? So, I've had some interesting conversations over the last couple of days. What's great, though, is we're going to have these conversations again in June, because it'll be the tightest time between IPWs ever, or eTourism Summit. So that will be something to look forward to. And maybe by June, you'll have some true international data
Well, I'm hoping, with the announcement on Monday,
Yeah.
I'm hoping that we're going to see some shifts of behavior changes very quickly.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
And you guys will be the first to know, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Listen, Derek, thanks for coming by. Awesome talking with you as always, and thanks for hanging out with us here at eTourism Summit in Vegas 2021. We'll see you in June.
Sounds good.
All right,
thank you very much.
Bye-bye.